Vito Churko here, sitting down with you all to introduce a special segment that I had the chance to record recently with Mr. Ted Lindsay, NHL Hall of Famer, and most notably, Red Wings legend, touching on a variety of topics, including his playing days with the Wings, his broadcasting career with NBC, his pushing for a union, a players' union in the NHL, as well as his foundation, the Ted Lindsay Foundation, which is aimed at a cure for autism. So please enjoy this following interview produced by my friend and my partner in crime, Mr. Brett Karvovich. Here it is.
I'm a Canadian, was a Canadian, I should say.
You were a Canadian?
I was a Canadian.
What do you mean by that?
I was born in Canada.
But you're not Canadian. Right now, you're saying?
When I came to Detroit to play hockey in 1944, long before you were born.
A little bit, yeah, a little bit ago. Not that long ago.
So then after I was here for about 6-7 years and was lucky enough to play for the Red Wings, I said, well, I'm not going back to Canada. I was in business with Marty Pavlich, my teammate.
Huh.
So I might as well become an American.
You can start recording actually.
Oh, I
We
bet.
can just go.
I bet.
Oh, you have been cool. Okay.
I got you, Vito.
So coming from Canada to here, how big of a difference was that for you, by the way, Mr.
No
Lindsay,
difference.
when you first made the
No
transition?
difference.
No difference at all. Why is that?
Why? Because people live in Canada, they get up in the morning, they eat breakfast, and they go to work, and
We do the same
that's what
thing
they do
here,
in
right?
Canada.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
and I played hockey, and I loved hockey, so it didn't matter as long as there was ice.
You would play.
Yeah.
And now you seem like a nice guy, so why did you get the nickname of Terrible Ted? Tell me about that, Mr. Lindsay. How did that originate?
It was we played of course, we played each other 14 times a year back in those days.
Less teams.
So we were playing in the 16 league.
Mm-hmm.
And we were in Toronto, and some Toronto newspaper guy, I must have had a bad night with the referees or something. So in the paper they put Terrible Ted Lindsay.
And they ran with it.
And they kept it up.
What do you think of it, though? Do you like it?
Yeah, it's fine.
Fine with you, yeah?
Didn't bother me.
You were quite the aggressor, right?
I was there for one reason, to win.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever I've been going through you, over you, under you, whatever.
And how was playing with Gordie Howe and Sid Abel on that production line? Those guys really helped you out with winning too. I know that, to a
Well,
large degree.
See, I always say, you said, how was it playing with Gordie Howe? And I always say, Gordie Howe played with me. You know
What are you trying to say? Yeah, what are you trying to say?
Well, I came here in 1944.
Mm-hmm.
He came in 1946.
Okay,
So he joined me. So I was here. So he came to play with me.
very nice. And you hoisted the cup with Gordie 4 times in your career.
Yeah,
And then-
we didn't have a stupid manager like Jack Adams. Montreal won the Stanley Cup 5 years in a row.
Mm-hmm.
1955, when we won the last Stanley Cup, in my era. Montreal, Adams, in those days he had 18 players on a team. He didn't have 25. He had 5 defensemen, 3 lines, 2 extra players. Could be 2 defensemen, 2 forwards, or 1 and 1. So
Did you like playing for him?
Adams traded, no.
No,
I
not at all.
playing hockey. I wasn't playing hockey for Jack Adams. I was playing hockey for the Red Wings
Mm-hmm.
and the rest of my teammates. Are
We're live right now.
we?
It's rolling too. This fine?
Oh, I didn't
You're good with
realize
this?
it. That's
yeah,
fine.
it's rolling.
Fine
So
by me.
okay, cool. Now Jack Adams kind of had a falling out with you then towards the end as well, with you trying to form that players union, right? And you wanted to get more rights, more compensation for the players to allow the guys, right, to seek employment with other teams as well, not to be owned.
No, you're going too fast, sir.
No?
No. We as players back in those days, the owners met 5 or 6 times a year.
Mm-hmm.
The hockey players never met because we never spoke to each other.
There's nothing.
There was.
Yeah.
I'll give you an illustration. If we were in Toronto and we take the streetcar up and get Carleton Street, get off at Carleton and Yonge, and Howe and I would be walking over to Maple Leaf Gardens. If a Toronto player come out of Maple Leaf Gardens and we're on Carleton Street, either he'd cross the street or we'd cross the street because we didn't speak to each other, and it was a wonderful way to play hockey.
Mm-hmm.
coach never had to get you up. You're ready to go.
You're saying that the players are different now then, huh? In that regard?
Well,
You trying to say
they all
that a
got the
little bit?
same. They all have the same lawyers. Not every one of them, but most of them have the same agents, and most of the agents are lawyers. And that's fine and dandy. They're making good money.
But you didn't need that, you're saying, for yourself. You were able to do everything by yourself without any help, right? Without the agent.
If I didn't know how good I was, how do I know how much I'm worth?
Mm-hmm.
You see, so. And if you don't know how good you are,
How do you
you
know
have
what
to
you're
have,
worth, right?
have an agent to tell the management how good you are to play for him, for the team.
Playing for the Wings from 1944 to 1960 in your first stint with the Wings. What was that like playing for the same team all that time?
Great. It was wonderful. But back in those days, you were raised in a farm system.
Mm-hmm.
Originally, Hamilton was the Red Wings farm club. Then they went and moved to Windsor. And the Windsor's, what do they call them? Windsor, no, it wasn't Bulldogs. Windsor, I guess Red Wings. And that's where the kids were.
Started off at.
That's where Glen Hall, School, guys like that all played, came from the Red Wings or the junior team to the Red Wings. Toronto Maple Leafs was the Toronto Marlboros. They played in Maple Leaf Gardens. So they grew up with the Maple Leaf on their chest. So there was a loyalty.
Yeah.
There was a loyalty.
Different kind of loyalty. There's
Yes.
not that anymore.
No.
It seems like in professional sports as
No,
a whole,
because
too.
now you have a draft. So
Uh-huh.
there's no draft back then. In my case, we were playing in Hamilton one night. I was at St. Mike's playing junior in Toronto. And after the game in Hamilton, I got my bag over my shoulder, coming out underneath the seats. And a man popped out of with my bag on my shoulder. This white-haired gentleman says, "Are you Ted Lindsay?" And I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "I'm Carson Cooper, chief scout of the Detroit Red Wings. Ever think about playing pro?"
What did you say?
He said the right words, playing pro, playing hockey.
You wanted that, huh?
So he didn't know, but I was ready.
Mm-hmm.
But anyways, he said, "Well, I'm chief scout." And he says, and there was only 6 teams now, but they didn't have a draft. In those days, they had a negotiation list. And they had you were allowed 25 names. In other words, the Red Wings were allowed 25 names, and that way they could bury 25 bodies. And if the kid wasn't good to make the Red Wings, he would maybe get stuck in, well, I think Indianapolis was our farm club at that time in the American League, which Grand Rapids is right now. So he says, "I'll have to check with the National Hockey League tomorrow. If your name isn't on the other 5 teams' league, base 25 names, he said, I'm going to put you on Detroit's list." He said, "Oh, wonderful," because at that time they had 2 players, Jack Stewart and Jimmy Orlando. They were tough, competitive, not dirty, competitive defensemen. And in Kirkland Lake, where I lived, 600 miles north of Windsor, on a clear, cold night, our normal temperature was 15 below. No wind chills, that was the temperature.
Really cool,
You
huh?
could get, and WJR used to do Red Wing hockey games way back in the olden days. And on a clear, cold night in Kirkland Lake, I could get Red Wing games. And Jack Stewart and Jimmy Orlando, as they said, that's why I became a Red Wing fan. And so when this man mentioned the Red Wings and going to check the roster to see if my name was on any of the other 5 teams, I was hoping it wasn't. And it wasn't.
So it worked out
I ended up
perfectly
going
for
to
you
Detroit,
then. Then you played all those seasons with the Wings, and then you were traded to the Blackhawks. What was that like for you?
Well, it was, as much as being traded, it was a decision. Adams was, you had mentioned earlier about the Players Association Union It was association. 'Cause
At that point, yeah.
all the kids were from small communities in Canada. Union was a bad word. Association. So Doug Harvey and I were on the pension board for the National Hockey League, such as our pension was. But that was started by Sid Abel and Silaps, Toronto, Glenn Harmon, Montreal, back in the late 30s and early 40s, such as our pension was. But at least those guys started something. When they came in the league, there was nothing. And so they were good enough to take this on and start something. And I just believe very strongly that we should be able to sit down and discuss things. So Doug Harvey and I ended up being on the pension board. And we thought, I thought, one night we're having a meeting, and because as I said earlier, we don't talk to each other. So how do you form an association? Well, Doug and I had the meetings for the Players Association, or the pension. And he thought it was a good idea. And we went that way, and that was the start of it. I do the same thing today. It was something that was needed. Fellas should be able to have an opinion. And so we did it. Got traded to Chicago.
And then Harvey was traded too.
Who?
Harvey was traded too.
Not for another 4 or 5 years.
But because of that, stemming from
Montreal
yeah.
Canadiens, he's the greatest defenseman ever to play, even over Orr.
Wow.
But the difference between Orr and Harvey, Orr was a better skater.
Okay.
But when you look at Montreal Canadiens, and they have Rocket Richard, Jean Beliveau, Toe Blake, Beliveau, Geoffrion, Doug Harvey controlled that power play. He was like a puppeteer. He controlled when they got on the ice. Those guys never moved until he made them move. That's how good he was. Orr didn't have those kind of. He had Phil Esposito.
Okay.
You know, he had some good players, but not as many as Harvey had. Montreal.
Who was the greatest player that you played with in your career?
Howe was the greatest player ever to play.
Okay. Better than you, yourself, Mr. Lindsay.
Oh, yeah.
You can say that.
Oh, yes, I say that.
Uh-huh.
I was just lucky to play the game, and I had good teammates.
And then you played under Sid Abel, too, at the end of your career when you came back to play for the Wings.
Well, yeah,
what was that like?
I retired from Chicago. I wasn't through, but Marty Pavlich and I were in business, in the automotive business. And when I went to Chicago, we had just started our business. Marty had just retired, and our business wasn't wealthy enough to support the both of us, even though we were only making $9,000 a year playing hockey. Our business still couldn't, but that's the way we lived, on $9,000 a year. But when I going to Chicago, because I couldn't afford $18,000 for the two of us, you see. So after I was there for 3 years, I'd come back every summer and I'd work the business and go back, and I was existing. I was still a Red Wing. Had it tattooed here, tattooed here.
You wanted to be a Red Wing.
Tattooed back there.
You were loyal.
Well,
as much as you possibly could.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Loyalty goes to where you are. But I played in Chicago, but I didn't play as well as I should have, because I was still a Red Wing.
At heart,
I still played the best I thought I could, you know. But it all worked out. I finally quit, come home.
Then you came back. You came out of retirement to play for Sid Abel and the Wings.
I was
that
retired for 4 years.
Yeah.
And I went to see Sid, and I said, I had done some work for NBC on hockey.
Calling games, right?
Afternoon games.
With Tim Ryan?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did the interviews between beers. It'll come to me in a second. It's the trouble with getting old, you see.
You're fine. It's understandable. Yeah. No problem.
So anyway, I finally went, I did the work for NBC, and
That wasn't good enough though for you?
well,
You
no,
still had an itch for playing hockey
I
at
went
that
to
time?
Sid. I said, Sid, I want to be identified as a Red Wing,
Uh-huh.
not as a Blackhawk. And I said, I'd like to come back, and I don't want to do hockey on radio because I want to run my business with Marty. So in hockey, they only did 7 or 8 games, 10 games for television, because television was just starting.
Mm-hmm.
So he says, well, why don't you come back and play? I laughed, looked at him, and I laughed. He says, no, he says, I think he can help you. You can help us.
And you did.
Well,
A regular season
I
championship.
talked to my wife, she didn't want me to do it.
Uh-huh.
I talked to Marty, my partner, he didn't want me to do it. But I loved my game. So I said to Sid, I said, I'll go to training camp. And that year they were training in Detroit. And as long as I can play on the first shift for the Red Wings in training camp, they went on the ice at 8 o'clock. That way I could get off the ice at 9:30, get showered and dressed, go to lunch with a customer, take my tired body home to get ready for the next day for training camp.
So doing both at the same time.
Yeah.
Your business at the same time as
Yeah.
this is
So
going on.
Sid says, we can do that. So I said, okay. Well, nobody knew anything about it, me playing for the Red Wings that year. The day before the season opened, Sid went to the press club. I still hadn't signed anything. He says, got a young rookie that we're going to use this season, and his name is Ted Lindsay. And that was the first time anybody knew.
Wow.
But I'd been working out with the Red Wings for a month because they worked at the Olympia practicing. But I always kept myself in shape, so everybody thought, nobody made anything of it. And so Clarence Campbell made a statement. He's the president, was the president of the league at that time. After 2 weeks after the season opened, he made it national television and newspapers. When a 39-year-old man thinks he can play in the fastest game in the world, he'll learn his lesson.
Did you learn your lesson? Or no? The opposite,
Well,
right? Occurred a little bit at least?
A month to 6 weeks later, because after we started the season, I was performing pretty good for an old guy. So Clarence Campbell wrote another article. Because after we played, as I said, we played 14 times. After we went around the league once, I went around the league twice, I was wondering who's any better than we are. So I got the guys starting to think that we're better. We're better. We're not, because the league experts, the newspaper guys, radio guys, they picked us for 5th or 6th in the 16 league. Nobody had too much faith in us. But after we went around the league twice, I thought, who's any better than we are? Long story short, we played Montreal home and home, the last 2 games of the season, for first place in the league. We beat them in Montreal. We came to Detroit and we beat them Sunday night for the league championship.
You clinched it at the Olympia.
Yeah.
How was it playing, by the way, at the Olympia, known as the Red Barn? How was that?
Great building.
Yeah?
They had the greatest ice in the league. And I've always felt very strongly, Toronto used to have lousy ice. When they used to come in here and play in our rink, it was like giving them a downhill slope because the ice was so good compared to what Maple Leaf Gardens is and was, that these guys were faster than normally they were. So it was tougher for us to play. But long story, I mentioned Clarence Campbell came out about 2 months after the season started and said I was wrong. Ted Lindsay proved me wrong, and he proved himself to be a tremendous athlete. So he forgave me, or he apologized to the country. And the guy that I was trying to think of earlier was Brian McFarland, was with me on NBC Hockey.
Okay.
Yeah, we still see each other when we go to Florida. He has a place in Florida, goes there for about 8 months of the year. And so...
But you came out of retirement and proved all the doubters wrong, really, by coming back and doing what you did at 39
yeah, and
years
the thing was, we played Chicago in the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
And we were in the 7th game at Olympia because we won the league championship.
Mm-hmm. At home ice then, yeah.
Home ice.
Yeah.
And Toronto or Montreal, Chicago were ahead 2-0 in the 7th game at Olympia. And they, game is halfway over. They never got past center ice. We were going to beat them. Long story short, they ended up, Eric Nestorenko should have gotten a penalty, which he did not get. But then we got a penalty right after that. This is after maybe 20, almost 20 minutes of the period. We're into the last period. 2-0. We get the penalty. They got Hull and Makita on the power play. They get 1 goal, and that picked them up. They beat us.
But you thought you guys had it at home in Game 7,
Well,
right?
we should have. We don't get the penalty.
Uh-huh.
And that stupid Glenn School referee.
Blaming it on the referees, really?
Well, it was the truth.
Yeah.
He was like they all are. They're all blind and stupid.
Still to this day, huh? Same thing, huh?
Same.
All the refs.
Have you watched any of the playoffs?
I have a little bit. I watched last night.
Bad
Game
referee.
1.
Bad referee.
Yeah? All around, huh?
They're making bad calls. Really bad calls. Referees get to the point they think they're the game.
Mm-hmm.
That's dangerous when they think they're the game.
Not good for the game
No,
at
not
that
good
point,
for the
right?
Not good for the team, as they say. Montreal beat Chicago 4 straight because they beat
To win the
us
Stanley
out
Cup.
to win the Stanley Cup.
Yeah.
But if we'd have they had not given us that penalty where they got,
You guys could have beaten the Canadians, you're
we'd
saying?
have beat
in the
the
Stanley Cup
Canadians.
Finals?
We'd have beat the Canadians.
Wow. Very bold.
Yeah.
But you're always kind of bold, right? A little bit at least.
What do you mean bold?
Bold.
Truthful.
Truthful. Okay, so more of
Not
that than bold.
Truthful.
Okay, just truthful.
Yeah.
Always truthful. Mr. Ted Lindsay, and really
Truthful.
quick.
Truthful Ted.
Truthful Ted, I
Not
guess. There we
terrible
go.
Ted.
There's a moniker. No terrible Ted. Truthful Ted. There we go. Now we got it here. Really quick. You won it 4 Stanley Cups, an 8-time first-team All-Star. So what's your legacy as a Red Wing? And a Hall of Famer, obviously, at the same time. What's your legacy as a player in the league and as a Detroit Red Wing, in your
A
opinion?
legacy? I don't have a legacy.
No lasting legacy?
I just played the greatest game in the world. I played with some of the greatest hockey players in the world, which Howe is one of those.
How about Sid Abel, by
And
the way? Among the greats.
When Sid came back from the Second World War, he became Gordy's and my father image. Because we were our first time away from home.
Mm-hmm.
My mother's apron strings and all those wonderful things, you know. But he was our father image. And I wish he would have been 5 years younger. Because,
To play longer with you guys.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
we set some good records as the production line. But we would have kept Sid in the league for another 5 years at least.
Do you like that name, by the way, for the line that you guys run with Howe
Production?
and Sid Abel? Yeah. Is that a good name for it, you
production
think?
name, yeah, well, we were scoring goals.
And that's production, right?
And we happened to be in the automotive capital of the world, making cars.
Okay.
So production
Makes
lines.
sense. Automobiles,
So that's where it
yeah.
all came from.
Very
See?
good.
See, your viewers
Learning
will be able
stuff.
to understand that now.
I know. It's very fitting then. The automobiles, the production,
Right.
offensive scoring of goals left and right with your line, and it makes sense then. Very good.
Left winger and right winger too.
Yep.
Right?
Yep, with you and Howe,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. Now, really quick, talk about your foundation, the Ted Lindsay Foundation, and what you do for that.
Well, we raise money for foundation or for autism research.
Okay.
We've been involved with a University of Washington in Washington State for 4 years. We've given well over $1.5 million there for research. Now, research is important because research discovers what is a mystery. And what causes the epidemic of autism in Europe, Canada, and the United States? It's an epidemic. And
Now, why autism, by the way, for this foundation of yours?
well, I was on the stretching table here where we're doing this interview.
Okay.
One of the men who owns this, John Czernecki, he's stretching me one day, and he mentioned his son Dominic, who had autism. And I'd never heard the word before. So I went home that night and got the dictionary out and looked up autism. Come back in the next time, and he's stretching me, and I said, "What can we do for Dominic?" He said, "We can raise money." And how do old hockey players raise money? They have golf outings. And this year will be our 14th year of fundraising. And the greatest people in the world to me are the Red Wing hockey players.
They come out for the golf outing then, right? To help you guys
Mike
out.
Babcock is an absolute gem. Everybody in this world should be like Mike Babcock. And there wouldn't be any problems in the world.
Is he a great coach too, by the way? Good
Yes, he
enough to
is.
keep the team winning going forward?
Yes,
Yeah?
I hope he stays here forever.
Very good. Well, thank you very much for all your time today, Mr. Lindsay. I
Well-
appreciate it.
My pleasure. I hope that you get instead of getting a black mark in your class, that you'll get a good mark.
I think so. I think so, sir. Thank you very much.
It's a real pleasure to meet you.
Yeah, you too.